Hello everyone, I'm so excited to have you here. I'll be teaching you a very, very important concept in music, keyboard playing basically, and it's titled chord voicings. Yeah, so you can look into your slide and you have it on your screen there. Let's go through it together. So before we talk about chord voicings, I would like to differentiate between these three important terms: chord quality, chord voicings, and chord inversion. So, what are chord qualities? It's simply a chord quality simply tells what kind of chord is this. What kind of chord it is this. So, there are major chords, there are minor chords, there are dominant chords, there are diminished chords, there are augmented chords, and then there are suspended chords. So when you're talking about chord quality, you're either talking about major, minor, dominant, and all of those things. But when you're talking about chord voicings, you're talking about how is this chord being played, how it is played. I'll expatiate on this later. So it could be an inversion, it could be an open voicing, or a closed voicing, or other types of voicing that we'll see later. So it could be an inversion, it could be an open voicing. So an open voicing, right, and sound, right. So close voicings too. Why chord inversion simply changes which bass note is at the bottom. So chord inversion is the same thing as can be the same thing as a chord quality, but this time around you can invert chord qualities. So instead of having a particular major chord like this, you simply just change this bass note by taking it up. Do you get? So that's chord inversion. So let's go into chord voicings itself because that's the focus of the class. So if you hear chords, if you hear chord voicing, let's use this analogy. If chords are the words, voicings are your tone of voice. Do you get? Same words, but it changes how people feel. I can say come, for example, in my calm tone, come here, and the person understands that okay, he's telling me to come. When I say come here, I'm saying the same thing, right? But the tone in my voice sounds if I was angry when I said the second come. So I can play a chord. Somebody else can play that same chord. But the difference between my play and his own play can be the chord voicings. That is how we choose to play them. The same chord, different voicings. And this changes how the music will be felt at that moment. So, definition of chord voicing. A chord voicing is the specific arrangement of a chord notes, of chords notes. Specific arrangement of chords notes. Chord voicings are about how you arrange the notes of a chord, not just which notes, but their order, spacing, and register. So you are not just concerned about how these notes are arranged, because if you are concerned about that, then you should be talking about inversion. But here you're talking about the order of these notes, talking about spacing, you're talking about register. So when notes in a chord are within a particular register, say C, A, G, these are closed voicings. But when they are far apart, say I have C, G, E. Can you hear this? This is an open voicing. You can see how widespread my hand had to go in order for me to play this chord. So chord voicings may be played by either one hand or both hands. So two chords can share the same roots and quality but sound completely different depending on their voicing. Yeah. I'll explain this after now. So why chord voicing matters? First, no mold or clutter. Prevents chords from sounding thin or muddy. So instead of just playing this all the time, you can actually play something like so this is for your right hand, you can play this, instead of just playing it. So instead of having this muddy sound in your left hand, actually, can you hear that? So it helps you sound pro. without learning new chords. Makes your playing sound more professional. I'll explain this later. Smooth hand movement and less stress, meaning less stress. Control texture plus mood creates emotion and color. The last one, independence from a bass player. So let's go into different types of chord voicing. So 5 common chord voicings. First, we have closed voicings. This involves compressing all chord tones within the smallest possible span, usually within a single octave. So when you compress notes within an octave, one can C. So from this C to the next C, this is an octave. So when all the notes you are playing are within this octave, that is called a closed voicings, whether you play them inverted or not. So this is a closed voicings. All 3 notes squashed inside one octave. So the next one, open voicing, simply involves spacing out the note across wider interval range, typically leaving gaps larger than an octave between the lowest and the highest note, used to avoid muddy sound in low register. So low register means where your left hand falls in, right? So instead of having closed voicings on your left hand, because sometimes it can be muddy, it can clash with a bass player. Do you get? So instead of having your notes this way, you can space. So this E actually makes this C chord brighter. You still have that depth there, but then it's not as muddy as this. Can you hear this? Oh, that's too deep. Can you hear how happy it sounds? Let's go to the next one. Drop voicings. This specifically involves dropping a note, a specific note, from a closed configuration down an octave. Okay. We have drop 2 and drop 4. So, but the most commonly used are the drop 2s. So, drop 2 simply means dropping the second highest note. These are suitable for harmonies. So, say I have C, E, G. Now I have the first, second, and third. This is the highest note, right? This G here is the highest note in ascending order. The second highest note this is the first highest note. This will be the second highest note. So the E here becomes the second highest note. Now the rule says start close, then drop the second highest note down 1 octave. So I take this second note, highest note, the second highest note down 1 octave. So I'm giving it to my left hand, right? So becomes. Can you hear that? Oh, wow, sweet. This is another chord voicing. It's not closed. It sounds open, right? But the reason why it's open is because a note has been dropped down. Do you get it now? Yeah. So that's a drop 2. So can you hear this? So let me simply play this song. It is well. That hymn that says it is well. The hymn. So just the first line. And it will sound like I'm harmonizing the melody, because that's what drop voicings helps us to accomplish, harmonies. So can you hear this? These are chord voicings. So let's go to the next one. We have shell voices. A shell voicing is a 2-note or 3-note chord shape that uses only most essential notes of a chord to define its sound. Usually contains only the root and the third and the seventh. Left hand plays harmony, bass player handles the root. So here, right, you can have the bass, you can have your left hand playing chords, but these chords are just majorly the root, the third, and the seventh. So you're taking out the fifth. So these are chord voicings. You can either do this or entirely take out the roots so that the bass player can play the roots while you play the harmony, which is the third and seventh. Can you see this? So you can use this as a passing chord to the four. So usually you play. Do you hear that? So instead of playing, you can actually play. Now, the third and the seventh note actually determines the quality of a note. I will explain when we get to guide tones. So the seventh can also be a minor, can be major, can be dominant, can be, yes, those are the three major qualities for a seventh note. While the third can only be major or minor. So let's use a dominant seventh. That is a flat seven instead of just seventh. So the same song. So can you hear that? You can decide to add the roots by playing. So these are chord voicings. Just the root, the third, and the seventh. So let's go to rootless voicings. Rootless voicings are chords played without the root note, typically in the left hand, allowing the pianist to focus on the third, seventh, and chord extensions such as ninth, 11th, or 13th. It's a common technique where a bass player plays the root. Here, you are playing full chords on your left hand. Full chords on your left hand. Full chords. So you allow your bass player to handle the root. So let's try this 6-2-5-1 for popular movement. So you have. So usually you play this in your left hand. Right. So we are bringing all these chords now to your left hand, so that your right hand can do the melody line. Okay. Can you hear that?